more potentially impactful, potentially highly controversial than the other. From the environment to gender to the cutting down of government to Ukraine to Israel to the southern border and immigration, Donald Trump has said that on day one he intends to sign a whole chunk of executive orders. We've already counted 15. Over the next 1 week, there might be 200. Now, let's distinguish between executive orders, which come under a lot of pull and pressure from the US Congress, and the big one, which is the invocation of emergency at the southern border, which gives presidential powers to Donald Trump. But there are a whole host of other issues that are taking place. Dr. Aaron Watson joining us on the broadcast. Adrian Calamel is with us. And I'm expecting Ambassador Mark Sofer from Israel joining us in just a bit as well. Dr. Aaron Watson, well, here we are. What do you make of the inaugural address, which turned out to be an action-oriented address, not just about a healing touch and nice things about the founding fathers? Donald Trump has said, I've got an agenda and I intend to get started. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that that's what the American people voted for. At the end of the day, the support for Trump and his policy approach and what he intends to do in these 300 executive orders were precisely what the American people wanted. And so I think that in that sense, this is also much less controversial than perhaps the first time around, where people didn't really know what they were getting. Trump was seen as very unpredictable. This is precisely what people want in America right now. So in that sense, I don't think that this is, that there's anything unexpected here. And in terms of the content of these executive orders, I mean, again, that's exactly what people wanted, and they know what Trump stands for. So from my perspective here in Australia, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we could talk about what that means for our relationship and so on. And I think that's where things get a little bit more complicated. But I think for the American people, this is going to be pretty straightforward.
So I was going to ask you the immediate next question, because when you hear a Donald Trump, he says, well, we are going back to Panama. I'm not really understand what exactly that means. It's fine to rename the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, fair enough. He said, I want to be remembered as a man of peace. Has this just made your life easier? Or when you are advising clients, has it made your life really complicated?
It makes it more interesting, that's for sure. On one hand, I mean, I think that some of these things for Trump, the actual practicality and implementation is another question, and it's about what he stands for when it comes to American people. But, for us here in Australia, it is a little bit more complicated. And, our relationship with the United States is obviously very much focused on both security relationship, but also on economic partnership. Economically speaking, the United States is surging ahead. Productivity is really high. There are big differences between Australia and the US as to why that is. We have very high wages in Australia, for example, very strong labour laws that the United States doesn't have. And so there's a big difference there. But we have a very strong economic partnership. We have a very strong security relationship. But in terms of that security relationship, we also have focused very significantly on our relationship with India, as you know, and our economic diversification, which is not just about China. We focus a lot on our other relationships in Southeast Asia as well. And so for us, it's about, well, this is still going to be an era of multipolarity. Mm-hmm. Trump is saying this is about America exceptionalism again, but I don't actually think it's that simple. Not for a country here in the Indo-Pacific region, not for a country.
So I want to pick on that thought before I go to the rest, because about 5 years ago, there was a global push that the reorientation of global priorities is going to happen around the Indo-Pacific, that the new Cold War is with China. It's already started. And then along the way, we went back into NATO versus Russia and Ukraine. We went back to Israel and Hamas in the Middle East, and we've gotten lost there for the past couple of years. Do we see a reorientation back to the Indo-Pacific?
I'm not sure that it's an orientation away or a reorientation back. I mean, if you think about Trump's China policy and what that means for a country like Australia. So, it was never that simple for Australia. You'd go to the US and people would say, oh, well, you need to diversify away from China. Now, that's just smart because 38% of our exports are with China. However, we tend to dig dirt out of the ground and put it on the back of a ship and send it to China. We don't have the same issues around tech transfer and so on, which we've obviously seen with this whole TikTok debacle that's been going on in the last 48 hours, 72 hours. We don't have those same tech transfer issues and that sort of integration economically with China. So for Australia, it's very much still about the Indo-Pacific. And yes, there's the economic case, but also from a security standpoint as well. And that's partly due to our geography, but a very different economic relationship with China to what the US has.
Well, the Chinese are coming for all of us.